For the ways that you want to change us, God, are ways that we can't even think about. And you want to make us ready. You want to make us ready to be those unexpected heroes that we're talking about in our worship together through teaching. And I just pray, God, that you will be with us now as we hear more stories from your word about the way that people served you and the way that people loved you and how we can do that in our own world. Thank you so much for bringing us together this morning. Thank you so much for being here with us, no matter what. We praise you, God. We love you. In your name, amen.
Good morning, Epic Church. Ooh, am I a little loud there or not? There we go. Or is that better? You know what I love is I love that song because no matter where we are in our spiritual journey, God presses in and he meets us exactly where we are. And that is just the awesome thing about our loving and amazing God. We're in our series called Unlikely Heroes, and I got to be honest with you that I love superheroes. Yeah, my favorite superhero is Batman. And I even went as far as when I was a kid, I got Batman underoos. You guys remember that? I'm dating myself slightly a little bit there, but I used to put on the underoos as a kid, and I used to just run around the house because I wanted so desperately to be Batman. I actually thought I was Batman, and my mom had to correct me. What we're doing with this series is we're not talking about superheroes. We're actually talking about normal, ordinary people that did extraordinary things for God. And so we're going to be looking at three individuals specifically, and I want to give you a background about these guys, but we're going to be looking at one story of what they did for their king and their friend David. And we're going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 23, and the three people that I want to talk about, the first one is Ishbosheth. And he was one of those guys. These guys are actually known as David's mighty men, is what they've been termed as. And so this guy served alongside David on the battlefield, and it's said that he killed 800 people with a spear. The second guy was Eleazar, who also served and fought alongside David. And it said that both David and him were taunting the enemy. The enemy started to approach to attack them. All of David's army fled in fear. And the only two people on the battlefield were David and Eleazar. And it said that Eleazar fought so long, so hard, that his hand became frozen to the sword. And there's a medical terminology that for this particular thing called pseudospasmodic paralysis. And what that means is that your hand is in a fixed position for such a long period of time that it becomes paralyzed in that position. I don't know how in the world he got it opened back up. It doesn't say, but the third person is Shammah, who also was serving alongside David, but he was defending Israel's crops and this particular field, and the enemy was coming to come and destroy this field of crops. And again, all of Israel's army fled in fear. Who's the only guy left? Shammah. And what does he do? He stands his ground, and because of it, it's said that God gave him a great victory that day. The thing I want to talk about today is honor. Honor is a very hard thing to describe. It's a hard thing to define. But I want to be able to unpack this the best way that we can. But before we look at honor, I want to look at what does it mean to live in dishonor. This word dishonor is this word called adamos. And it means to treat as ordinary or common. It means to actually devalue something that needs or should receive value, but it doesn't. It actually goes so far to say that you take something that is normal and common and you make it worth less. And so what it does is it takes the bar and it lowers the bar. It devalues something. That's what it means to live with dishonor. But what does it mean to live with honor? Honor is this word teme, which means to treat as, or to respect or value something, or to treat something as precious or valuable, or to hold something as valuable or someone. as valuable or precious. What does this look like? Well, when my family and I were in New York, we got to be good friends with an individual from Beijing, China, by the name of Zichen. And he wanted to go home to go see his mom and grandmother in Beijing. A month later, he comes back, and the very first thing he does is he calls me up. And he says, hey, I want to come see you and your family. And I was just honored by the fact that we were the first people that he wanted to see. And so he comes over at our house, and he sits down, and he gives me this box. Now, when I open up the box, inside of the box is this red stone. Now, this is an ordinary, common red stone that you can find anywhere in that particular region of China. It's just ordinary. It's just common. But what made this valuable? Well, it's three things. The first thing is the person who actually gave it to me. My friend Zichen thought of me that much to be able to think and say, I want to get this for my friend Steve. The second thing is what he did to the stone. And he spent hours with a carving tool and carving on the end of the stone old Chinese characters that when you place it in ink and you stamp it on a piece of paper, it reads John 1:1, which is, in the beginning was the Word. And the third thing is the story that accompanies this stone that I can be able to tell over and over and over again. That's what made it valuable. What does it look like for these guys, these three guys? What does it look like for them that they treated something or someone with honor? Well, let's dive into 2 Samuel chapter 23. And we're going to start in verse 13 is where we're going to be. Now, just before that, you can look at these three individuals, what they did specifically. But then something happens. Starting in verse 13, it says this. During harvest time, 3 of the 30 chief men came down to David at the cave of Adullam, while a band of Philistines was encamped in the valley of Rephaim. At that time, David was in the stronghold, and the Philistine garrison was at Bethlehem. David longed for water and said, "Oh, that someone would get me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem." So the 3 mighty men broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem, and carried it back to David. But he refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out before the Lord. "Far be it from me, O Lord, to do this," he said. "Is it not the blood of men who went at the risk of their lives?" And David would not drink it. Such were the exploits of the 3 mighty men. Here's what's going on in the story. Is that David, who is exhausted from battle, he runs to this particular cave called the Cave of Adullam. Now it's interesting, this is the very same cave that David runs to and flees from Saul, who was the previous king, because Saul wanted to kill him. I don't know what David is thinking, but if I could try to get into the mind of David, I could just imagine him thinking, are you kidding? I'm back here again? Fleeing from my enemies? Are you kidding? And maybe he's discouraged. Maybe he's frustrated. And I think even from the way that he cries out to whoever can hear him, I believe that there is a sense of frustration. And so he cries out. He says, "Oh, would someone please give me a drink of water?" And at that moment, the 3 men valued David, their king, and their friend enough to break through the enemy line and to get David a glass of water. The water is just a normal, ordinary water. But what brought it value are those 3 things. 1, the people who got it for David. Number 2, how they got it for David. And number 3, the story that would be going on for centuries and centuries later. I want to give us 3 things of what honor does that I think are important from this story. The first thing is this: honor is selfless. Here's David, probably in a very weak moment. Honor lifts up is the first point. But here's David in a very weak moment who is probably feeling even maybe devalued because he's in the very same spot where he was before. But he's in a very weak moment. And what happens? These three guys come alongside and want to lift David up in his moment of weakness. They could have easily said, when David cried out, "Oh, would someone give me some water?" Or they could have easily said, "Go get your own darn water. I'm thirsty too." They could have easily said that. But instead, they valued the relationship not because David was just king, but because of the relationship that they formed together, fighting on the battlefield together. And so, in the moment of weakness, these three guys come alongside David and they lift him up. And they bring value to David. Gang, I just want to share with you that if you want to have a valuable marriage, if you want to have an honorable marriage, then bring value to your husband or wife. Invest in the relationship. Parents, if you want to bring honor to your kids, I got 2 little girls. If I want to bring honor to your kids, then invest in them and teach them what it means to live a godly life. Create a godly foundation for them so that when they are on their own, they can make wise choices. That's the value that you can give to your kids. Dads, I want to talk to you for a moment because since I don't have sons, I have daughters. If you have daughters, I want to give this challenge to you. Date your daughters. Date your daughters. That's something I've been challenged by, is just dating my daughter so I can show her what it means to be a princess and to treat her as valuable. Dads, maybe for some of you who have sons, invest and bring honor to your sons by showing them what it means to be a godly husband and a godly father and a godly man. In a world where things are devalued, it is time for us to bring value to those relationships. Kids, let me speak to you as well. You can bring honor to your parents. How? By listening to them. Listening to their wise advice, because we've been there, done that, right? Let's be honest with us. We've been there, done that. We know what you're going to do. Listen to us because we don't want you to end up with some of the same things that happened to us, right? Or maybe for some of you is you bringing honor to your boss. While other people might be speaking negatively about your boss or about their boss, whatever it might be, even though it might be true, you can still bring honor to your boss by speaking positively about them. And you might be saying, "Steve, you have no clue what it's like to work for this guy." You're absolutely right. I don't. But here's the thing. Respect is earned. Honor is given. Respect is earned. Honor is given. Honor is what you do and what you bring to the relationship. And so it's something that you actually give away, even though they may not deserve it. And we'll get to that in a moment. But honor lifts up in the moments that people need it, such as David. The second thing is honor is selfless. Honor is selfless, meaning is that honor relinquishes one's own rights for the sake of the other person. As I said about these guys, they valued so much the relationship that they had with David that they were willing to relinquish their own rights and say, "I am here and I will be selfless for my king and for my friend." Which leads to the third point that I just want to share, is that honor involves sacrifice. Honor involves sacrifice. And again, as I already mentioned before, David in his moment of weakness, in his moment that he needed someone to come alongside of him and lift him up, they were willing to sacrifice their lives for the sake of their king and for their friend. You know, the world has seen one amazing act of honor. When we were devalued in our sin, when we were worthless in our own sin, that God himself showed the greatest act of honor by giving of his Son in bringing value to us when we didn't even deserve it. What I want to do this morning is just take communion this morning. I want to invite the band to come up. And we're going to take communion this morning because we're going to celebrate the act of honor that God has given to us. That God has valued us enough that he wanted a relationship with his creation. He could have said, I am done with humanity, but he didn't. He chose us. And he says, I love you that much, and I want to show you honor and bring value to this relationship. And so we want to celebrate that act of honor. And so I want to invite you to come up through the middle and actually come over and just celebrate the act of honor that God has given to us. But before we do, let me just ask you this morning, what are the areas in your life that you need to bring honor back to? What are the areas in your life that you need to bring value to once again? Maybe it is your marriage. Maybe it is that you know you haven't invested in your marriage the way that you needed to. And you need to bring honor and value back to your husband or wife by investing in that relationship again. Maybe it's going back to the good old days of taking them on a date, right? And just show them that you love them. Maybe it's in the area of your kids. Maybe it's in the area of being able to raise up kids and be an example to your kids of what it means to live a godly life so that they can go and do the same. Maybe for you, it's at your workplace. Maybe it is your boss. Maybe it is a coworker that you just struggle with. And maybe there's something that God is saying, I want you to bring value to that relationship, even if you don't think they deserve it. You can bring value to that relationship. Maybe it's a friendship, whatever it might be. What is God challenging you to bring value back in the one area of your life this morning? So I want to invite us to just for a moment, just to reflect on that and reflect on what it is God is challenging us with. But then in that moment, for you, just coming up and celebrating the greatest act of honor, because when we celebrate the greatest act of honor, here's what it does. It helps us live honorably to others and to bring value to others as well, because God brought value to us. So I'm going to pray for us this morning. God, I just thank you. In the moment that all of us were devalued because of our sin, feeling worthless, feeling like that we don't amount to anything, you reached down into humanity and you became one of us to bring value back to us. By giving of your Son and dying on the cross for every single one of us. And you say, if you choose me, you will have life eternally with me. And you can live honorably and show value even when others may not deserve it. So God, as we just celebrate and reflect, maybe there's an area of our lives that we just need to bring value back to. Maybe it is our marriage. Maybe it's with our kids. Maybe it's with a coworker or a boss, or maybe it's in the area of a friendship. Maybe somebody wronged us and we're feeling the effects of that. God, help us to show value and honor to these relationships the way that you have designed us to. And so, God, I just pray that as we celebrate your great act of honor, may you help us to live honorably to other people that are around us. God, we give this over to you and we thank you. And we pray this in your name. Amen.